The kingdom of Lilies was a place of color and cruelty. In the heart of its waters bloomed lilies of every hue, pink for the concubines, blue for the queens, purple for the kings. Their petals perfumed the palace lakes, glimmering with pride and power. But on the far edges, where the canals turned to sludge and the perfume to rot, there bloomed another kind, pale and unwanted, their petals ghost-white, bruised by dust. That was where Cassia was born, among the white lilies, where no light lingered long. Cassia was the youngest of 7, though her parents never bothered to remember how many children still lived under their broken roof. The hut was small, built from driftwood and trash, pressed against the mud walls of the city's lowest ring. She had learned early that hunger made people cruel. Her ribs pressed against her skin like the skeleton of a bird, her hair dull with grime, her dress a patchwork of sacks. When she smiled, which was rare, her gums bled. Her mother, once a courtesan of failing beauty, had eyes like spoiled honey and a mouth sharp with resentment. Her father was a drunk who staggered home from the docks, reeking of old wine and lost hopes. Every night, their voices cracked the walls. If she were a boy, her father spat once, we'd have a worker, not another mouth. If she were prettier, we could have sold her years ago. Waste of food, just die. Cassia learned to make herself small. Small enough to be forgotten. Small enough to survive. Her only kindness came from Clara, her eldest sister. Bright, gentle Clara, who always smelled faintly of river reeds. Clara hid pieces of stale buns under the floorboards, whispering, "Eat this, Cassie. You need to stay strong." "But that's yours. Sis, I heard you're going to work today. Please don't overwork yourself. Come back safe." Clara answered with a grim expression. "Yeah, they're sending me away for some bread. That's why I hate the bread, and I hate them. Cassie, after I'm gone, they'll turn on you. They've already broken my legs. Promise me you'll run if you have to. Promise me." Young Cassia grew frightened. "But sis, how will I live without you?" Clara hugged her frail sister. "Cassie, my dear, live for both of us, okay? Promise me." Cassia, tears in her eyes, whispered, "Okay, sis." Cassia never understood how Clara's eyes could still hold warmth in a place where love was treated like a luxury. Then came the night that shattered her world. The men from the upper rings came drunk and laughing, dragging shadows into their hut. Cassia hid in the corner, clutching a broken wooden bowl, her heart beating so fast it hurt. She couldn't see clearly, only the flash of her sister's hair and the sound of Clara's scream. Inside the hut, all 6 men, naked, surround Clara. They tortured her again and again, until there was nothing left. Her screams stopped, but the men didn't. Cassia saw her mother, father, and her other 5 brothers eat the bread with relish. Her brothers left home after that day. Her younger brother gave Cassia a bag of bread and said, "This feels like I am eating my sister. I can't do this. I'm going to go find work elsewhere. Anywhere is better than this hell. I advise you, Cassie, don't stay here. You don't need to come with us after all this. It's natural that you won't trust us. But don't stay here." Cassia took the bread Clara had earned with her life and tucked it into her ragged shirt and whispered, "I'll survive. I'll make them pay what they did to my sister." Cassia waited until dawn before crawling out. Her bare feet sank into the dirt, following the trail of broken reeds down to the river. There, among the discarded bottles and lilies, floated Clara, her face as pale as the moonlight, her eyes open, but seeing nothing. Cassia waded into the water, her thin arms trembling, her tears mixing with the river's current. She dragged her sister to shore and buried her beneath the willow tree by the old canal, using her hands as tools until her fingers bled. No one helped. No one came. When her mother tried to send her to the brothel, Cassia spit in the floor and walked out with nothing but a chipped bowl and her sister's ribbon. That night, she sat before the small mound of earth and whispered, "I'll change this, Clara. I'll make them all pay. I'll make them remember us." From then on, she began to change. She cut her hair short with a dull knife, binding it under a rag. She learned to mimic voices, first whispering low-laid, then copying the speech of the street boys. Her throat burned, but she practiced every night. After weeks, she could easily pass as a young boy. "Cain," she said to herself in a cracked mirror. "My name is Cain." It was her first act of defiance, rebirth by her own hand. She began to move differently, more quietly, more intelligently. She smeared ash on her face to look sicker, wore layers of rags to hide any hint of her growing body. She let the world believe she was cursed, unwanted, untouchable. The world beyond the slums was vast, yet cold. She slept under bridges, scavenged for bread, and listened. Always listened. People talked freely around a beggar girl, never realizing she was memorizing every word. Disguised as a boy, she roamed the city for work. One evening, after days of hunger and rejection, she found herself standing before a small bookstore near the Royal Library. The wooden sign above the door was faded, and the shelves visible through the window were covered in dust and forgotten pages. A tired-looking man with silver hair sat behind the counter. "What do you want, boy?" he grunted. "Work," Cassia, now Cain, said, lowering her voice. "I can clean, carry things." The man eyed her thin arms and frowned. "You'll break in half." "I won't," Cain replied simply. Something in her tone made him pause. Finally, he waved a hand. "Fine. Sweep the floor. Don't steal. You eat after you work." And that was how Cain began her new life. The store owner, Master Alden, was rough in words but not in heart. He spoke in growls and sighs, but when Cain finished cleaning, he'd mutter, "Ch, you worked hard today. Here, leftover bread." At first, Cain refused, afraid it was a trick, but when Alden scowled and shoved the food toward her, she accepted, trembling. Days became weeks, weeks became months. One night, Alden caught Cain staring at a page for too long. "You can't read?" he asked. Cain shook her head. "Tch, a boy your age should know the words by now. I'll teach you some. You better work hard and pay me back. Understood?" That was the first time someone offered to teach her anything. The lessons were difficult at first. The letters twisted and blurred, and the ink stained her fingers, but she refused to give up. Each night she read aloud until the words began to make sense. "Ugh, a boy like you should know this already," Alden grumbled, but his eyes softened when he saw her scribbling late into the night. The little room he gave her behind the store was small, windowless, with a thin mattress, a jug of water, and stacks of nearly ruined books. But to Cain, it felt like a palace. She organized every corner, even polishing the cracked glass she used as a mirror. She trained her body, too. After work, she'd run behind the store, lifting stones and crates, practicing her punches in the air. If she grew stronger, no one could hurt her again. Her body began to change, firming, building muscle beneath the rags. Sometimes Alden's wife, Aunt Susan, visited the shop. Her presence was like sunlight in the dim store. "You're just skin and bones," she said once, setting down a small basket of dried meat and sweets. "Eat these, boy. You need them more than Alden does." On another day, she brought neatly folded clothes. "My sons outgrew these. I was going to throw them away. You're the same size. What a blessing." Cain touched the fabric in disbelief. They were soft, clean, and warm, far too fine for someone like her. "Thank you," she murmured, but the words felt too small for the feeling in her chest. A year passed. Cain could now read the titles of books, recite numbers, and even calculate sums faster than Alden himself. Math especially came easily. The numbers spoke to her like friends she had always known. "You're a strange one," Alden said once, shaking his head. Got a mind sharper than most nobles, that's for sure. Cain didn't answer, only smiled faintly. Inside, she was beginning to understand that the world's power didn't lie only in crowns and bloodlines. It also lived in words, in logic, in knowledge. Alden once offered to take her home to live with them. He said, "My wife would like to have you around. We could even send you to school with my boys." But Cain hesitated. Trust was still a foreign language to her. "I'm fine here," she said. "I like the books." Alden studied her for a long moment, then simply nodded. He didn't press. Still, the kindness of the old couple began to thaw something deep inside her. Her once hollow cheeks filled out. Her hair, though short, grew shinier. Her arms, once thin as reeds, showed the strength of her daily work. Aunt Susan laughed once when she saw her lifting a heavy box with ease. "You've got a wrestler's blood, boy. Maybe you'll win us a fortune someday." Cain only smiled, a quiet, knowing smile, because she had already begun winning in ways no one could yet see. And on some nights, when the moonlight slipped through the cracks of her room, she'd sit among her stacks of damaged books, her fingers tracing over the words she could now read. Knowledge is the seed of power. She whispered to herself, "Then I'll grow the strongest tree this kingdom has ever seen." And with that, she blew out her candle and slept not as Cassia the slum girl, but as Cain, the child who had begun to rewrite her fate. By the time Cain turned 10, she could read every book in Alden's shop and recite every column of numbers on the account scrolls. She had grown stronger, too, her arms no longer thin as reeds, but firm with muscle. The boy who once swept the floor in silence now moved with confidence, her back straight, her eyes alive with quiet purpose. Alden often said, "You learn faster than a flame catches dry straw. I'd be a fool to keep you cooped up in here forever." So, one spring morning, with the scent of blooming lilies drifting through the narrow alleys, Alden and Susan decided to send Cain to school. The stone schoolhouse stood near the middle ring of the city, where the streets were paved and the air didn't smell of rot. Cain had never been in such a clean place. The floors gleamed, the windows caught the sun like jewels. But what unsettled him most was the laughter. So loud, so free. The children here wore clean uniforms and carried books tied with silk ribbons. Cain's own clothes, though well kept, were clearly secondhand. Still, he lifted his chin. He had faced worse things than whispers. "Cain, over here!" It was Finn, Alden and Susan's third son, a lively boy with untamable chestnut hair and a grin that could disarm even the sternest teacher. He ran up with two taller boys behind him. "These are my brothers, Wren and Gavin," Finn announced proudly. "They're both older and think they're smarter." Wren, the eldest, only smirked. "We are smarter." Gavin, the middle one, added dryly, "We're also less likely to burn the kitchen like you did last week." Cain tried not to laugh, but failed. It felt strange, laughing like a normal boy. It almost hurt, but in a good way. Class began soon after, and it turned out that Finn had been telling everyone for weeks that he was the reigning math champion of the stone schoolhouse. So, when Cain solved an advanced problem on the blackboard in mere seconds, Finn's jaw nearly hit the floor. "Wait, you can't just do that," he blurted. "Do what?" Cain asked, feigning innocence. "Beat my record. I'm the math champion this year. You can't take my title, no matter what Mom and Dad say." Cain tilted his head, eyes sparkling with mischief. "All right, then," she said calmly. "How about a fair competition?" Finn crossed his arms, grinning. "Fine, I'll ask Father. Don't cry buckets later." From that day on, every Saturday evening became the Stone family math battle. It started small, Alden as judge, Suzanne baking sweet buns for the victor. But soon, even their neighbors began showing up, sitting by the windows to watch the weekly duel. Alden would sit behind a table holding sheets of paper filled with problems their teacher sent each week. Wren and Gavin played the role of referees, while Suzanne kept score on a slate. Cain, are you ready? Ready. Finn, born ready. Then the challenge began. Fractions, equations, riddles, and puzzles that made even Alden squint. But no matter how tricky, Cain always solved them with frightening precision. Sometimes Finn would beat her by seconds, more from luck than skill. But soon he realized the truth. Cain wasn't just good. Cain was different. "You're not normal," Cain complained once, throwing his chalk. "Neither are you," Cain said with a teasing grin. "Normal people don't challenge math problems for fun." Susie would laugh until tears filled her eyes. Alden shook his head proudly. "You two are going to bankrupt me in prizes one day." Years passed that way, and the Stone household became more than a home to Cain. It became the first place she felt truly safe. Wren grew into a scholar of literature. Gavin pursued science and mechanics. Finn stayed her fiercest rival and closest friend. They all treated Cain as family, unaware that beneath the disguise was a girl who had once crawled through mud and hunger. But Cassia, Cain, never forgot. Every smile, every full meal, every clean shirt was a reminder of what she had lost and what she must protect. One night, while helping Alden organize a shipment of scrolls for the Royal Library, Cain found a set of old ledgers sealed with wax. Inside, hidden among trade records, were documents older than the kingdom's founding. Myths, written in fading ink. One caught his eye. The heading read, "Chronicle of the White Bloom, the First Lily." She turned the brittle pages carefully, tracing the curling script with her fingers. When the world was water and void, it was the white lily who first bloomed under the moonlight. From her stem rose the blue, the pink, and the purple. But when pride drowned the pure, the white was cast into the mud, waiting for the day it would rise again. Cain's pulse quickened. It was the same story she'd glimpsed years ago sweeping floors in the Royal Library. She hadn't imagined it. The legend was real, recorded, hidden, nearly erased. She whispered to herself, "So the white came first, and the others grew from it." If that were true, then the entire kingdom's hierarchy was built on a lie. She closed the book slowly, her mind burning with questions. Why had the legend been buried? Who decided that white lilies were lesser? And most of all, could that truth be used to change everything? Alden caught her reading and frowned. "That one's not for sale, boy." "Why not?" Cain asked. "Because words like those can start wars." Cain met his gaze and said nothing. But inside, a spark had already caught fire. At 15, Cain and Finn tied for first place in the National Scholars Exam, a competition reserved for the brightest minds in the Lotus Kingdom. Their names were printed on the Academy's notice board for all to see. For Finn, it was a joyful victory. For Cain, it was the key she'd been waiting for. That evening, under the violet dusk sky, she stood by the canal near the Stone home. The water rippled gently, catching the faint reflection of her disguised face. "Clara," she whispered, "I've kept my promise. I'll change this world, even if I have to burn its lies to ash." But power never sleeps quietly in kingdoms built on pride. Rumors began to spread. "That stone boy Cain, he's no ordinary scholar. They say he's from nowhere. No birth records, no lineage. Maybe he's a bastard son of nobility, maybe worse." Whispers turned to suspicion. Teachers began watching him more closely. The more Cain excelled, the more others wanted to see him fall. Alden and Suzanne noticed the tension, but said nothing. They only stood by him, quietly proud, silently afraid. One night, as they were closing the shop, Alden said, "You remind me of a boy I once knew. Clever, stubborn, and wouldn't stop until he had the truth. He tried to expose corruption in the royal court. What happened to him, Cain asked. He disappeared. Cain's eyes darkened. Then he probably got too close. Alden sighed, looking at her with a mix of worry and respect. Whatever you're chasing, boy, don't lose yourself doing it. But Cassia had already lost herself long ago. She had become someone else to survive. Now, she intended to use that disguise to rule. By 16, Cain had gained access to the royal library as an apprentice scribe, a position reserved for prodigies. The same halls where she once swept dust now opened their doors for her brilliance. There, she encountered more forbidden texts, carefully erased records, and sealed archives. And every night, when no one was watching, she copied passages into her own secret journal, the Book of the Lost Lily. Each word was a weapon. Each truth was a seed waiting to bloom. Yet, even amid her rising brilliance, Cain never forgot her debt to the stones. She spent evenings helping Suzanne with shop ledgers, tutoring the younger students at the school, and joining Finn in his endless challenges. One evening, Finn threw down his pen after another close defeat and groaned, "You're not human, Cain. I swear, the gods gave you 2 brains." Cain groaned, "Only one, but I listened to it carefully." Finn leaned back, arms crossed. "When we're older, we'll both serve in the palace. You'll handle the numbers, I'll handle the glory." "Glory?" Cain repeated, amused. "Of course, you'll need someone to protect you when you start angering nobles with all that intelligence." Cain looked at him, half smiling, half sad. If only he knew. The day would come when she wouldn't need protection, but the world would need protection from her. That winter, as the Lotus Kingdom prepared for the Crown Scholar examination, the test that decided who would serve in the royal palace, Cain made a silent vow. "If I pass," she whispered to the moon, "I'll go to the palace and learn their secrets. I'll find out who decided we white lilies were dirt. I'll uncover every lie, every crime, and I'll rewrite the story myself." She looked at her reflection in the water. Short hair, sharp eyes, clean uniform. To the world, she was Cain, the prodigy boy of the Stone family. But deep inside, she remained Cassia, the girl who had once dug a grave with her bare hands and promised to change the world. And she would. Cain was changing, quietly, steadily, like a seed pushing through cold earth. The boy the school had come to admire for his sharp mind and calm presence was in truth a girl hiding beneath layers of fear and willpower. The more she learned, the more alive she felt. Her notebooks filled with numbers, sketches of flowers, and maps she drew from imagination. She would sit by the window of the library, sunlight falling on her ink-stained fingers, the scent of dust and ink mixing with faint traces of her mother's voice. "You're worthless, Cassia." But she no longer flinched when she remembered those words. Each equation solved, each essay praised by her teachers, was another brick laid between her and the world that once broke her. Still, even as her mind soared, her body betrayed her. Puberty came like a quiet storm. Bandages tightened across her chest. Her once flat stomach began to curve softly. Her voice grew less convincing, though she trained it each night before sleep. Low, clipped, steady. It was exhausting, living a lie with such precision. And then there were the classmates. Children were cruel in the way only the privileged could be. They mocked her shabby clothes, called her mud rat when she passed the courtyard, and shoved her shoulder when no teacher looked. Cain never fought back. Not because she was afraid, but because she knew she couldn't afford to draw eyes. The less noticed she was, the longer she could survive. But Finn never ignored her. Every time someone pushed her, Finn was there. He'd step forward with that reckless grin and say, "You picking on my math rival again? I can't let my opponent get injured before our next match." It was a joke, but one that silenced the laughter. He became her shield without ever saying it aloud. At first, Cain thought it was pity. Then she realized, no, it was loyalty. Finn wasn't like his brothers, who sought fame and recognition. He loved competing with her because she was the only one who could keep up, the only one who made him burn with that bright, restless hunger to be better. But something in him was changing too. He grew quieter around her. His once teasing glances lingered too long. When she smiled, his heart stumbled. When she brushed past him in the hallway, his breath caught in ways he couldn't explain. Girls at school noticed, of course. They sent him letters scented with perfume, baked him sweets, whispered about his chestnut hair and confident stride. None of them was Cain. None of them carried that strange, fragile sadness in their eyes, the kind that made him want to protect even when he didn't understand why. One evening, the Stone household was quiet. The younger boys were asleep, and Mrs. Stone had gone to visit a neighbor. Finn knocked lightly on Cain's door, a question on his lips about tomorrow's exam. He didn't expect the door to be half open. He didn't expect to see Cain with her shirt off, back turned, hands clumsily tightening bandages across her chest. For one suspended moment, time froze. Finn's mind went blank, his throat dry as sand. The image before him didn't make sense, and then it did. Horribly, beautifully. Cain? What is this? Why? Cassia turned, eyes wide with horror. The silence between them was unbearable. Her heart thudded in her chest, each beat screaming, "It's over! It's over! It's over!" But before she could speak, Finn stumbled back, face burning. "Cover yourself," he stammered, turning sharply away, voice cracking. Cassia fumbled with her clothes, trembling. Her bandaged fingers felt clumsy, heavy. When she finally spoke, her voice was small but steady. "Brother Finn, please, don't tell anyone." He didn't answer at first. His mind was a storm, shame, confusion, relief, awe. The sweet scent in the air, the faint tremble of her words, it all fell into place. She wasn't a boy. She was a beautiful girl, the one he'd always wanted without ever knowing it. A strange, dizzy warmth flooded through Finn's whole body. He didn't know what to do with himself, his heart pounding like war drums in his ribs. To calm the storm, he forced his lips to move, whispering the words of their national song, the only prayer he could remember. "From the ashes we bloom beneath silver skies. Our tears became rivers where truth never dies. The moonlight remembers the chains we have shed. In fields of white lilies, our hearts rise instead." He looked down and let out a sigh of relief and whispered to himself, "All good." He turned to face her again, eyes wet, breath shallow. I, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I just, please," she whispered again, "just don't say anything. Not to anyone." Finn's chest ached. He wanted to say so many things, but all that came out was raw truth. "Cain, why? Why did you hide your identity? You deceived us for so long. Why?" Her lips trembled, but she lifted her gaze to meet his, eyes glistening like broken glass. Then, with a quiet strength that broke his heart, she whispered, "My name is Cassia, Brother Finn." And then the dam broke. She told him everything. About the slums, her sister Clara, the night she dug through river mud to bury what was left of her only friend, the years of begging, the library, the store owner who gave her a chance, the lies she built just to stay alive. By the time she finished, Finn's hands were shaking. He didn't remember when the tears had started falling, only that they wouldn't stop. He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her. Cassia, you endured this hell all alone. He wiped the tears from her eyes with trembling fingers. Cassia, I, Finstone, promise to stay by your side for eternity. You don't have to hide anymore. I won't let anyone hurt you again. I swear it. She froze at first. No one had ever held her like this. Not out of pity, not out of ownership, but out of care. Her heart cracked open under the weight of his words. She didn't know what to say. For the first time, she cried, not in secret, not in silence. In that small, candlelit room, two souls who had been drowning in their own secrets finally surfaced together. Outside, the moon rose over the city of Lotus, its pale light spilling through the cracks of the old house. And somewhere in the dark, the library's shadow stirred, ancient and patient, waiting for the girl who would one day shake the kingdom itself. The candlelight flickered weakly, throwing long shadows across the piles of books and scrolls that lined the room. The air smelled of old paper and midnight secrets. Finn sat across from Cassia, his face pale and serious. The weight of what he had learned the night before still hung between them. Her real name, her past, the lies she built for survival, but now her eyes burned with something new. Not fear, purpose. Cassia unrolled an ancient parchment on the table, its ink faded, its corners frayed. Brother Finn, she said quietly, everything I've done until now was to survive. But I no longer wish only to survive. I want to change everything. Finn's gaze softened. You've changed more than you think. She shook her head. No, not enough. The rot runs deeper than poverty. It's in the royal roots themselves. Her words sent a chill through him. You mean the king? Cassia's eyes met his, dark and resolute. The king, his bloodline, and every drop of power they claim comes from heaven. I've been studying the old texts in the library's restricted section. Some mention an ancient rite, a renewal of purity performed every generation. Finn frowned. A rite? Cassia nodded slowly, her eyes hard as tempered glass. 16 virgin girls, she said, her voice trembling with restrained rage. 16 sacrifices in every 16 years. They choose from the poorest families, some are sold by their parents, some are kidnapped and vanish in the night. No one dares to question it. They were all kept in a hidden chamber with high security. No one dares to intervene. Her jaw tightened. The investigation never reaches the palace. It never does, because no one suspects the crown. In a kingdom where life is so cheap, any crime becomes possible. The air seemed to vanish from the room. Finn leaned forward. That's not possible. The palace would never... The palace would, Cassia cut him off softly. They already do. The records are hidden under the guise of harvest festivals or divine offerings. But the numbers match. Every 16 years, 16 girls disappear from the capital, all under 16 years old. Finn's hand trembled as he touched the parchment. 16 virgins, for what purpose? To maintain the purity of the royal bloodline, Cassia whispered, to keep their divine connection unbroken. But it's a lie, Finn. A curse disguised as holiness. Her voice cracked, a flash of pain crossing her face. I've seen what faith twisted by greed looks like. I won't let it devour more children. Finn swallowed hard, the boyish warmth in him replaced by something colder, sharper. Then what do you plan to do? Cassia leaned back, the candlelight glinting in her eyes. Expose them, destroy the ritual, and free every girl who would have been chosen this year. Silence. Then Finn asked, You mean to go against the crown? Cassia's lips curved into the faintest, sorrowful smile. Not against the crown, Finn, against the rot that hides beneath it. He stared at her. This girl who had once been a beggar, now plotting to tear down an empire. Something inside him stirred. Pride, fear, and awe. "Then I'll go with you," he said simply. "You'll be branded a traitor." "Then I'll be a traitor with a purpose." He smiled faintly. "You once said you owed your sister a promise. Maybe helping you keep it is the only promise I was born to make." Cassia lowered her gaze. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she reached out and took his hand. "Then we share this vow, Brother Finn. Whatever happens, we walk the same path." The candle flickered between them, and for a brief heartbeat, it looked as if two shadows joined into one. The next night, the library felt different. The air was colder, heavier. Every breath carried the faint metallic tang of dust and ink. The shadows under the high arches didn't move, but Cassia felt them watching. Finn followed silently behind her, holding a small lantern that flickered like a dying heartbeat. "Are you sure about this?" he whispered. She didn't look back. "I've waited my whole life to stop being afraid. If I turn back now, then every pain I survived meant nothing." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she pulled open the trap door behind the rows of restricted shelves. A gust of ancient air rose up, smelling of stone and secrets. They descended the narrow stairs, one careful step at a time. Below, the darkness thickened until it felt alive. Strange symbols marked the walls, glowing faintly in silvery blue, as if lit by moonlight trapped underground. The floor was made of white marble, veined with purple, cracked in places, as though something beneath had once tried to claw its way out. At the end of the passage stood an altar. Its surface was etched with lotus petals, and in the center, a white water lily carved from bone. Finn set the lantern down, its light trembling across the carvings. "This looks like a temple." She brushed her fingers along the lily's edge, tracing the pattern of runes. Her eyes narrowed as she whispered the words she had taught herself from forgotten languages. "The gate shall close when envy bleeds. 16 lights for the one crown unseen." Finn frowned. What does it mean? Cassia's throat tightened. "It means this ritual was never divine. It was a curse, a spell, cast by one who envied the goddess's chosen, a purple servant who wanted the crown for himself. He sealed the gate to the heavens, trapping the goddess from visiting her children. The royal bloodline became desperate. They found a way to keep their false power alive by feeding the curse. By killing innocent girls," Finn murmured, voice trembling with disgust. Cassia nodded slowly. 16 every generation. Each one's blood was used to renew the royal connection. But in truth, they've been renewing the curse over and over for centuries. The silence that followed was suffocating. The air seemed to pulse, the symbols on the wall flickering as if reacting to the truth, finally spoken aloud. Finn took a step back. "Then if they do it again this year—" "The curse will consume the kingdom," Cassia said, her eyes glinting in the blue glow. "The blood will spread through the water. Every lily will turn black. Every noble line will die." Finn's voice dropped to a whisper. "And how do we stop it?" Cassia's gaze turned toward the altar, where the carved white lily seemed to shimmer faintly. "The only way to end the curse is to break the ritual before it begins, to stand where no one dared stand, in the center of the sacrifice." Finn stared at her, horrified. "You can't mean—" "I do," she said quietly. "I'll take the place of the chosen girls. I'll walk into that hall as the offering, and when the blood circle begins, I'll destroy it from within." "That's suicide." Cassia looked up at him, her face calm, almost serene. It's the only way. Finn clenched his fists. Then I'm going with you. If you fall, I fall too. Her lips trembled into a faint smile. No, Finn. If I fall, you live, and make the world I couldn't reach. He shook his head, stepping closer until his forehead nearly touched hers. His voice broke as he whispered, "You think I could live knowing you died alone?" Cassia didn't answer. The silence between them was thicker than grief, heavier than love. Finally, she said, "Then live knowing you stood beside me, even when the world turned dark." A faint rumble echoed through the chamber, the sound of old stone shifting, as though the library itself had heard her vow. The glow along the walls flared for a brief instant, and the carved lily on the altar opened its stone petals. Inside, something glimmered, a fragment of a crown, pale as moonlight. Cassia reached toward it, but stopped. Not yet. When the night of blood comes, the crown will find its rightful bearer. She turned to Finn, the reflection of that dim silver light dancing in her eyes. "We have little time. The next ritual is less than a month away." Finn nodded. Joss said, "Then we prepare. For the kingdom, for your sister, for every name the lilies have drowned." Cassia looked back once at the altar, the place where history had lied for centuries, and whispered, "For the goddess who still waits to come home." Above them, unseen through the layers of stone and silence, the moon broke through the clouds. Its pale light spilled across the city of Lotus, brushing against every roof, every petal, every ripple of water. And for the first time in 100 years, the lilies in the royal pond quivered, as if something ancient had begun to awaken. The palace shimmered under the ghost light of a pale, swollen moon. The night was silent, too silent, as if the world itself held its breath. Inside the inner sanctum, 16 girls knelt in a line, their heads bowed, wrists bound with white ribbons soaked in rosewater. Their faces were hidden beneath thin veils. The scent of lilies was so thick it stung the eyes, masking the sharper tang of iron and decay. Cassia stood among them, dressed in the same white silk as the others, her hair braided simply, her skin marked with faint sigils drawn by the royal priest. The robe hung loose on her frame, but her eyes, those eyes, burned with purpose beneath the veil. No one recognized her. To them, she was just another trembling sacrifice. The guards' armor clinked faintly as they led the girls into the great ceremonial hall. The marble floor was cold beneath their bare feet. At its center bloomed a colossal stone water lily, its petals spreading wide enough to hold them all. A pool of crystal water surrounded it, pure, still, reflecting the ceiling's golden constellations. Cassia felt her heart pound against her ribs. Each beat whispered a name. For the nameless, for the stolen. A palace maid approached with silver cups. "Drink," she murmured. "The goddess will make your passing painless." Cassia accepted hers with steady hands. Around her, the other girls hesitated. Their eyes, swollen from tears, darted to Cassia, the only one who didn't flinch. She raised the cup, smiling faintly. "Don't worry," she whispered, just loud enough for them to hear. "The goddess will protect us." Then, as the maids turned away, Cassia's fingers brushed her lips, spilling the drink into her sleeve. One by one, the others mimicked her, pouring the sleeping draught into their robes or onto the marble floor. Their breaths came in shallow, shaky whispers. "Keep your eyes closed when they come," Cassia said under her breath. "When I move, follow the light." Moments later, the chanting began. Low, guttural, ancient. The priests circled the water lily, swinging censers heavy with burning herbs. The smoke curled into the air like ghostly vines, filling the hall with the smell of incense and blood. 16 lights for the one crown unseen," the priest's voice echoed against the walls. 16 hearts for the gate reborn." Cassia lay down inside her carved stone coffin, the lid hovering over her face. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Across from her, Finn watched from behind a column disguised as a guard. His hand gripped the hilt of his blade, knuckles white. The lids closed. Darkness. She waited. The chants deepened. The sound of liquid pouring. The blood already drawn from past victims. Cassia breathed slowly. Then, when the drums began to rise, she moved. Silent as a shadow, she slipped open her coffin, rolling out onto the floor. Finn appeared from the corner, his face pale under the moonlight filtering through the high glass dome. Together, they moved quickly, unlocking lids, pulling terrified girls from their coffins. "Go," Cassia whispered. "Hide behind the altar. When the lights flare, run." The girls nodded, trembling, their eyes wet with fear and awe. Then Cassia turned back to the lily. The priests raised their hands, chanting the final words. The lead priest reached for her coffin, ready to draw the ceremonial dagger, and froze. His fingers stopped midair. His eyes widened. The offerings, his voice cracked. "They're gone!" A ripple of horror spread through the royal court. The king stood abruptly from his throne, his voice cold with authority. "Continue the ritual, now!" The priest shook his head, trembling. "Your Majesty, the circle, it's broken." Before he could finish, a blinding light burst from the heart of the water lily. Cassia rose from its center, bathed in radiant white. Her robe fluttered in waves of silver and light, and her dark hair shimmered, turning strand by strand into moonlit white. Every priest, every guard, every noble dropped to their knees. The light was too bright, too pure. It burned the lies from their eyes. Cassia lifted her hands, chanting the words she had learned from the ancient text beneath the library. "Let the lilies bloom in truth, and the chains of envy break. Let the curse return to shadow, and the goddess awakens." The marble floor split with a deafening crack. Streams of white fire raced through the ritual circle, consuming every trace of darkness. The stone petals beneath her feet glowed until they looked carved from the moon itself. Cassia's eyes turned silver. Her voice echoed, not just through the hall, but through every living thing in the kingdom. "Your time is over." The king stumbled backward, his crown slipping from his head. The priests screamed as the black smoke coiled from their mouths, sucked into the cracks of the altar, devoured by light. Finn shielded his eyes, watching as Cassia's form rose higher, the light wreathing her like armor. And then it appeared. A crown of pure light, forged from moonbeams and diamond dust, descended from the air and settled upon her head. The goddess's voice filled the hall, soft and thunderous all at once. "After centuries of silence, my child has called me home. Through blood, she brought purity. Through sorrow, she brought truth. Cassia of the white lily, queen of the moon's grace." The light faded slowly, leaving only the sound of dripping water and the soft rustle of trembling robes. Cassia stood at the center of the ruined ritual, her hair gleaming white, her crown pulsing with faint light. Her gaze swept across the fallen royals, Finn among them, kneeling not in fear, but in awe. "Rise," she said. Her voice no longer trembled. "The era of sacrifice is over." Outside, the night wind carried the scent of blooming lilies, pure white, untainted, and the moon shone brighter than it had in 100 years. The first rays of dawn touched the palace spires, but the light that filled the ritual hall had already swallowed the night. The darkness was gone, burned away by something far older and purer than flame. Outside, the bells of the capital began to toll without command. Their sound rolled across the city like thunder, calling every soul awake. The citizens of the Lotus Kingdom poured from their homes, barefoot and breathless, following the voice that had echoed through their dreams. A divine whisper, soft as moonlight, had touched every heart. "Come to me, my children." By the time the gates opened, the great courtyard overflowed with thousands. Peasants, laborers, orphans clutching rags, all stood shoulder to shoulder before the temple doors, trembling in awe. The scent of lilies filled the air, carried by the morning breeze. When the massive doors finally opened, the crowd gasped. Cassia stood at the altar's heart, crowned in white fire. Her gown shimmered like liquid silver, her hair falling around her shoulders in a cascade of moonlight. The air around her thrummed with sacred power. The very stones beneath her feet hummed as if alive. The people fell to their knees. Their voices rose as one, echoing like the sea. "Hail, white goddess! Long live the queen!" Their cry shook the heavens. All around her, the remnants of the royal court still knelt, those who had schemed, bribed, and killed to keep their bloodline pure, their jeweled robes now dulled to gray, their crowns cracked and melting. Then, before the eyes of gods and men, their bodies began to crumble, slowly, silently, into dust. The light that had crowned Cassia flared once more. It swept across the marble floor, through the corridors, out into the streets. Where it touched the innocent, it healed. Blind eyes opened, wounds sealed, hearts lightened. But where it found guilt, corruption, cruelty, it burned. Across the kingdom, the wicked turned to ash, their last cries carried away by the wind. By morning, the streets were cleansed of blood and gold alike. Cassia stepped forward, barefoot, her crown glimmering faintly as it pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. Finn stood beside her, not as a prince, nor a knight, but as the first sworn protector of the new reign. His gaze met hers, and for a moment, the weight of it all pressed on them both. The cost, the sacrifice, the eternity ahead. Outside, the first light of day painted the horizon in pale gold. The people watched as Cassia raised her hand. Her voice carried over the city like a song. "No more chains, no more offerings. No child shall bleed for another's throne." The crowd erupted in weeping and prayer. Cassia turned to Finn, her eyes soft. "The age of lilies begins," she whispered, and so it did. Under her reign, orphanages bloomed where the slave market once stood. Schools rose in the ruins of palaces. The poor were fed, the enslaved freed, and the temples once built for sacrifice were remade into sanctuaries of healing. The nobles whispered that she ruled with mercy sharper than any blade. But when night fell and the moon rose high, the people swore they could see her walking among the lilies, her white crown glinting in the silver light, her voice whispering blessings to every sleeping soul. Cassia, the queen of lilies, the white goddess, the child who had risen from mud and ashes to rewrite the laws of heaven itself. And from that day forth, the moon above the kingdom shone brighter, no longer watching in silence, but smiling upon the world her daughter had remade. Seasons turned, and the kingdom of lilies bloomed again. The rivers, once red with sacrifice, now shimmered with moonlit peace. Along the banks, willows dipped their silver leaves into the water, whispering in the evening wind. The streets were alive with children's laughter, merchant songs, and the scent of freshly baked bread. From the high balcony of the new palace, Queen Cassia looked down at the world she and Finn had built together. It was no longer the kingdom of fear. It was a kingdom reborn. Yet, even in peace, Cassia carried one final promise. Queen Cassia returned to the ruins of her childhood home, the place where all her pain had begun. The walls were silent, the air heavy with the ghosts of the past. She didn't need a sword. Her justice came in the form of truth. Every deed her parents had hidden was brought before the light. The light of justice burned them to a crisp. They tried to plead that they were her family, but Cassia's heart remained unmoved. They cursed and begged, then all fell silent. She found the 6 men who took her sister's life and burned them to a crisp too. Their names were stripped from the records, their graves left unmarked, erased by the law of the new kingdom. Cassia then searched for her surviving brother. When she found him, she didn't punish him. She offered him a second chance. "Work for the orphans," she said. "Help them become what we never had the chance to be." And so they did, in quiet repentance. Lastly, Cassia returned to where her sister Clara had been buried. Under the silver dawn, she moved the grave to the royal grounds, the very place where her reign began. The sister who once shielded her from hunger and cruelty, the only one who ever loved her when the world didn't. With her own hands, Cassia moved Clara's bones to rest among the royal graves beneath a flowering white lily. When the last shovelful of earth fell, she placed her palm on the soil and whispered, "Now you can finally sleep, my sister. You're home." There, beside the altar of the ancestors, she placed Clara's ribbon and whispered to herself, "May your soul be reborn in light," she murmured, tears catching the candle's glow. Finn found her standing there, silent and trembling. He stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You kept your promise, Cassia. You brought her home, and she'll always be proud of you." Cassia's tears fell freely then, not from sorrow but release. The wind outside carried the scent of lilies into the hall. The moon hung high, bathing them in its silver glow. In that moment, the goddess of lilies, the girl who once crawled from the mud, finally smiled. The lilies bloomed that morning, white as peace, bright as forgiveness, and somewhere beyond the veil of this world, a gentle voice whispered back through the light, "Thank you, Cassia." The next day, the king and queen of the Lotus Kingdom arrived with olive banners and trembling hearts. Cassia met them with a single gesture of peace. No long speeches, no grand decrees, just her calm smile and the simple words, "Let there be no more blood between us." A new era began that morning. Finn's 2 brothers, Ren and Gavin, served faithfully at the palace, as Ren the royal advisor and Gavin as commander of the White Guard, and when Cassia found them kind and loyal companions, she also found for them suitable brides from noble yet humble families. The palace, once silent and haunted, filled again with laughter and children's footsteps. When Mr. and Mrs. Stone, the old shopkeepers who had once taken in a ragged boy named Cain, came to visit, they stood speechless before the marble gates. "I can't believe we raised a queen," Mrs. Susan whispered, wiping her eyes. Cassia knelt before her, smiling warmly. "You raised me when no one else would. I'm just returning home." Mrs. Susan chuckled through her tears. "Then now that everything is settled, you 2 should finally tie the knot properly." And so they did. Under the arching boughs of the willow grove, Cassia and Finn were married. The moon watched from above as white petals drifted like blessings upon their joined hands. The kingdom sang that night, songs of healing, of love, of beginnings without blood. Healing was slow, but it came. Years passed gently, and one spring morning, the palace bells rang again, this time not for war, nor for coronation, but for life. Cassia had given birth to a daughter. Her hair was pale as snow, her eyes bright as starlight. Finn held her close, whispering, "Our little Lily." Cassia smiled through tears, tracing the baby's tiny hand. "May she grow in peace, never knowing the darkness we did." Outside, the willows swayed. The people gathered beneath the moon, lighting candles along the riverbanks, whispering blessings to their queen and her child. And for the first time in centuries, the kingdom of lilies truly slept in peace, guarded by love, watched by moonlight, and ruled by the woman who had turned ashes to dawn.